All right, what's up, guys? Thanks for joining us today. We're here with Brian Hatzel, who is a good friend of mine. Known him for, what is it, like six months to a year now?
Yeah,
And Brian is a guy that I've wanted to do this with for a long time. We've been talking about this for a good amount of time, and happy to finally sit down with you and knock this out. Brian's an awesome dude. His son comes and trains with us for baseball training, and Brian's honestly a guy that we reach out to and we have conversations with about people that I look to seek advice from in the baseball world, especially with pitching mechanics, stuff like that. And this is just basically the beginning for us in our relationship with that kind of stuff. And the whole goal is to just get Brian to give you guys a little bit of what we've been able to get from him, and then me as well to learn additionally, just on top of everything that we've spoken about. So big time into arm care education system at the college level, and also work with some MLB organizations. So Brian, I'll let you kind of tell them further about kind of all the stuff that you've done. Yeah, let's get rolling.
yeah. So great. No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And for all of you coaches and young athletes that are out there, I always appreciate the opportunity to talk with you a little bit and help educate you, so that way you can stay on the mound, you can stay out in the field, and have a good, long, healthy throwing career. That's what's I guess my passion started from. Early on in my career, I had some opportunities working in professional ball, and would see these guys, sign these big contracts, come in, throw a bullpen session, and then be on the shelf for 18 months to 2 years. And it was just always ask questions: why is this happening, and why now, and what can we do to try to prevent some of these things? So that's where I am with this stuff. So a little bit about me, Devin. So I'm a faculty member at Grand Valley State University. I teach there in the athletic training program. I specialize more around the biomechanics side of things. And for me, throwing biomechanics is kind of where it's at. So where I started, where I kind of came from, I did my undergraduate work in athletic training, exercise and sports sciences with a specialization in athletic training. Got certified, back in 1997 there with that. Really got interested in baseball when I was choosing where I would go do an internship. So like my last year in school, said, what do I want to do? Or I said, what don't I know much about? Right. And so I said, I haven't worked much with elbows and shoulders. So let's go ahead and get thrown to the wolves and let's work Major League Baseball spring training. Right. So that's kind of where I started it there. I had an opportunity with Baltimore Orioles at that time, worked through spring training with them, mostly with their minor league side of things there in Sarasota and the rehab facilities. And then I stayed on with their rookie ball team through the summer, and I decided, I really like this. I need to know more. What got me was during spring training, if you've been out there before, they've got 20 mounds set up. They run a mile long, right? And everybody just popping the ball into the mitt. And it's just awesome. Well, what you get to see is 20 different guys, and then another 20 guys an hour later, all different mechanics, all throwing different balls, all looking different. But yet forever, I've always heard this is the way to throw, right? This is the one mechanic. And that's just not the way it was. So it gave me an opportunity to learn how everybody's mechanics look a little different, but there's still a core foundational concept in staying healthy, right? So working with some of the pitching coaches at that time, just asking questions. I don't know if you remember names like Mo Drabowski, Joe Tanner. He was our hitting coach. Joe Tanner because you use his tee every day.
Yeah.
Just talking to those guys, learning about the biomechanics of the game, and learning from some of those old school guys that don't use video, don't use anything. They say, I can just see it, right? Those are some of the historic names out there and guys. So anyway, so I liked that. I really liked the baseball world. So I said, what, I'm going to look for baseball jobs. And so I found an opportunity at Ball State University, work with Rich Maloney, who is back there now, but he was at Michigan there for a good while. And just a really great baseball mind. And so as an athletic trainer, developed a really good relationship with him and our pitching coach, John Lowry at the time. And I was able to major in biomechanics. And so I spent a lot of time in the lab doing video analysis, muscle function, things like that, and really kind of got geeked on the muscle function components of that. So from there, spent 2 years there working baseball, really successful team, some really great guys, gone unplayed in the league for a good bit. And then I said, I just love the school thing. So I'm going to go back. And so I went back to the University of Florida and wanted to enhance my biomechanics again. They had created a PhD program in athletic training and sports medicine. And so there I got to work with another throwing sport in softball. And so I oversaw softball for a few years down there, a little bit time with women's soccer and those. But throwing sports, at a different way, right? Working with the ladies and seeing how they're throwing and how their game is a good bit different. It was so weird to me coming in the first day and they say, we only have 4 pitchers. Well, how do you have 4 pitchers? How can you make it, right? But that was the deal, right? So a lot of their training, a lot of their arm care, a lot of their preparation was very similar. So anyhow, in the PhD, then I got to really work on doing some good data and asking some research questions in the lab and measuring that. And really where my research interest has been is instability, specifically for the thrower. What can we do for the thrower? How do the muscles function with fatigue? How do they respond once they're fatigued? What are some of the components that we can take into not only a rehab setting, because a rehab setting, you talk about rehab, right? Like that's more like after the fact. After something bad has happened, you go to rehab, right?
Sure.
Well, that didn't make sense to me.
Right.
We have too many people that are already symptomatic. They already have issues going on. They're not quite on the shelf yet, right? But we can keep them from going on the shelf if we can take some of those rehab principles to preventative care, right? So we're trying to find that out. So that's really have been my guiding principle. Been teaching now for nearly 20 years at Grand Valley. Injury assessment, rehabilitation is kind of my niche. And then over the years, just been continuing to do research projects and trying to dive into the thrower and the health. It's been a good time. That's allowed me these past probably 6 years now to get in with some Major League Baseball teams, spend some time out there, spring training every year. I usually get out there for a week or more and just kind of watch what's happening clinically, see what's going on with the different arm care and different strength and conditioning types of regimen. And then, of course, from a rehab standpoint, too, what do you do once they're broken, right? And try to get them back unbroken. But what we do there, some of the long-term projects that I've got going now, we're in 5 years. So we're tracking those major league pitchers, volume, right? How much are they throwing? What are they doing? When they're on the shelf, why are they on the shelf? We're looking at, of course, velo through the course of a season. We're looking at bullpens. So often when we're measuring volume, we just measure the number of pitches they throw in a game, right? And what we forget about is how many times a reliever gets up in the bullpen, cools back down, gets up in the bullpen, gets back down again, right? Or those closers doing the same. And that's added volume. So love baseball, love trying to keep people healthy. And it starts really young with education and guys and girls both understanding their bodies and what is good performance and what is stuff that's risky.
Yeah, absolutely. And awesome stuff, man. I have a million questions for you. So we'll try to tackle those. But yeah, that's really good stuff. With the education system, I think it seems like you're pretty passionate about obviously just getting people to understand that in my opinion, I've played baseball for 20 years. I own a baseball training facility, coach collegiate baseball. Throwing a baseball, frankly, is just not good for the human body. I mean, let's just be plain and simple. I mean, it's just not good for you. So it's like preventative, right? It's proactive versus reactive, right? And a lot of times, like for me especially, I had arm surgery when I was younger, and it was just like we had 1 month off. It was 2 weeks at the end of August and 2 weeks for our Christmas break, right? And I was 16 years old, and I was squatting all the time. I was doing all of those sorts of lifts. But what they don't tell you is like you need to number one, give your arm rest. I mean, when we weren't at practice, so we'd lift, we'd do a strength and conditioning stuff, and then from there we would go straight into a doubleheader. So that was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we were playing 6 games during the week on the back of lifting. And a lot of times when we were doing those workouts, we were throwing and stuff like that, and then we go play double headers. And then we were all playing travel baseball as well. So we were all playing tournaments on the weekends. And that was kind of when my arm just hit that overload. And just I came back from that 2-week break over winter, and I just threw like I normally did. It was like two throws into my long toss progression, and just bam. I mean, that was it. You know right away when something like that happens. And, you know, I go to the doctor, get it all checked out and looked at, and they're like, oh, you're fine. We don't see anything wrong, whatever. Just give it a week or so, go back to it. So I'm like, okay, sweet. That's awesome. I get to play baseball. I thought it was something serious. Like, my arm seriously hurts when I throw a baseball. So a week off and I'm back. Let's go. You know, and I was almost bummed to tell coach at that point. I was like, I got to be off for a week. You know, you never want to be in that spot when you're 16, but
Right.
so I tell coach, and you know, I was like, oh, I feel pretty good. First time out in like a week, and then sure enough, when I let it loose, it was like, oh, that's no good. That is no good. So I went on for a long time thinking I had nothing wrong and that I was overreacting and stuff. So this is a message to everybody that has shoulder issues, especially. Get the dye injection. Do not say no. Do not take no for an answer. Get the dye injection in your shoulder. It's going to be a pain in the butt. They're going to stick a needle 10 miles long all the way down into your joint, but it will let you know if you got something seriously wrong. So we did find out I had a labral rotator cuff tear. Patched me up, and I was ready to go about 6 months later to play. But it set me back at least 3 months, and that was you know the deciding factor in whether I played my baseball my senior year in high school. So I wasn't able to do that, which is a huge bummer. So it's a huge bummer, but what we do kind of as an organization, and I want to honestly throw this off of you to kind of get your endorsement with the whole thing. It's just like arm care and preventative maintenance. So we are anti-weighted ball as an organization, with an asterisk next to that statement. I mean, if you're an older guy, physically developed, you know, collegiate level or higher, or, you know, in rare circumstances, high school, but you have to be, I mean, one physical specimen up to, you know, mid to upper 80s, clearly been doing a lot of workouts and stuff for a very long time prior. I mean, just a physical specimen. I mean, we're not getting like 140 pound, you know, 5'11" toothpicks doing weighted ball stuff. Is kind of what I'm saying. So somebody with a really strong support system to kind of help that. It's really to increase VO load by a couple miles an hour, and that's if you're looking to kind of get over the edge, 88 to 90 kind of thing, stuff like that. But what we do, Brian, is like just a lot of body weight stuff. And then if we were to do anything weighted, it's to be with like 2.5 to 5 pound plates. And we just kind of do arm circles or just kind of lay back stuff like this, you know, stuff from the sides. We kind of work that in 10 reps at a time, you know, through sets, through like 4 times through different lifts, and then do like J-band stuff, and then into long toss progressions and stuff like that. And this is obviously all for upper level kids. Younger kids, we do this stuff, but it's all abbreviated. All this stuff is abbreviated. 0 weights are going to go in their hands when they're doing anything. It's all, you know, arm circle stuff, rotational stuff, a lot of just hip firing stuff with like exercise bands and stuff like that. But we really try to stay away from that stuff. So wonder what your arm care routine. I mean, you have a 14-year-old son. So like, what kind of stuff are you putting him through? What kind of stuff are you setting him up for to be prepared to play in high school and then beyond?
Yeah. Well, so obviously it would be bad news if anybody I coached or my kid had an issue, right? So I'm really careful with this with all of my kids. And you're absolutely right. You started off with the fact that we're just not naturally supposed to be able to throw a ball like this. And it's absolutely true. Anatomically, we're not set up really good to do this. We ask ourselves to go through extreme ranges of motion that we otherwise can't achieve unless we're throwing a ball. Like, I couldn't move my hand back far enough to mimic what it looks like when I throw. And then when I do pitch, if I'm up off the mound, the rotational velocity in glenohumeral joints, 8,500 degrees per second. 8,500.
That's coming off. So I heard 7,000. So it's actually 8,500.
It's been clocked as high as 8,500. Yeah.
Whoa.
And so, I mean, and this is 60 degrees per second right here. So imagine what 8,500 degrees per second is. And then you ask to break from this position to this position, right? So that's what that rotator cuff does, right? So it's just not natural. It's not good. So I think my philosophy is that arm care starts in the lower extremity and the core.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So arm care comes a little bit later, right? And what I mean by that is the primary things that I'm doing is I am working on the strength development in the core. And what I mean by that is the lumbopelvic unit, right? So like the glutes, the hamstrings, the quads, the adductors, the abductors, right? Lunges, side lunges, all those sorts of things, planks. Get them good static strength first, and then get to more functional type of movement strength, rotational components and everything. If I have a good, strong foundational base, that's where most of the force and most of the stresses can be mitigated by utilizing that good, strong drive through, getting those hips to come through, right? Connecting what's being developed down below to come through the core, so that this is really just a slingshot, right? And I'm not trying to throw too hard with that. And then on the backside of that, on my follow through, let my body absorb the stress. Let my body do the braking, right? So that way it's not all coming from those external rotators or that rotator cuff that you hear so much about. But rotator cuff are very small attachments to the humeral head, and they're pretty small muscles. Their job really is to take, so if this is your shoulder, it's called your glenoid. It's what you kind of tore a little bit with the labrum.
Sure.
And this is where the head of the humerus goes in. Its job is to keep the humerus going into the head, of the glenoid fossa there. So when you're going at 8,500 degrees per second, those muscles are trying to keep it closed here. So that way you can use that labrum to keep you kind of in the joint. What happens though, is when we go too fast, we're not fast enough, then what ends up happening is that humeral head starts to slide here and rotate right on top of that lesion, create the Bankart lesion like what you had, right? Or slap could be another one. There's a couple of different types of injuries that occur there. But so we want to keep that as much as we can in here, and we do that through the arm care. But it starts from the lower extremity in the core, and it's amazing what I see when I work with young athletes. They just don't have a core. These are the kids that you see when they throw. They're hyperextended way back like this, right? Their belly kind of sticks out a little bit. They try to get way tall on it. It disengages their legs. Their core is wide open. Everything's just happening from the arm. They got to stay low. They got to be able to drive through. That initiates the hips. Keep your core nice and tight coming forward and throw that way. So as far as arm core things, if we're talking specifics to the upper extremity, I like to do a lot of functional stuff. So if they're like, for instance, I have them do lunges with their arms up. I call it fastball position, right? Curveball position, right? Change up position, right? And just have their hands up like that. And they got to pinch their shoulder blades together and do lunges down to first base, right? That way I'm getting here, plus I'm initiating into the lower extremity. There's actually some interesting research that's out here recently that talks about doing arm care essentially while also engaging the lower extremity. Makes it much more effective, right? So I can also work the core while they're doing that. I can keep them back in this good position, and I'm getting lower extremity all at the same time. Have them go sideways and things like that too. And that's all stuff that I can do with no fancy equipment.
Right.
I don't need bands to carry around, which isn't fancy. And those are great. Have them, put them up on the fence, use them. But you don't necessarily have to have those, right? Other things that I oftentimes will do is I just have them, laid for, before practice starts, and just pinch their shoulders, just lay down in the grass, right? Put their heads down, on a sweatshirt or whatever, into the grass and just pinch, right? And then we progress to getting their hands up again while they're doing that. Then from there, of course, the rotational stuff I do. I do the diagonal patterns, of course, but we want to work tris and our bis. We want to work lats. We want to work our scapular stabilizers. The key is get those scapula to come into the spine, right? You want to be able to pull that back. That's the core. So if you think about that glenoid that we talk about, that's actually part of the scapula. So if that scapula is winging and kind of hunched forward, then that glenoid changes position as well while the humerus is here. So if I can take that scapula, pull it back again, and now I've got a good connection here, things are going to be a lot better, right? So we want to keep anything at all where they're getting, it's called scapular retraction. We want to get them back like that.
That's great. So it sounds like, we can mix in a lot of maybe like bicycle flutter kick stuff with arms extended, stuff like that. Just stuff to engage core, arms all at the same time. And that's stuff that we're definitely going to take in, digest, and then mix that stuff in. So that stuff's unbelievable. I love that stuff. And so my buddy had the same surgeries I did, labral and rotator cuff. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So labral and rotator cuff tear as well. And they said, so he had spoken with a doctor, and he said they cranked that thing down, like, as in, like, I think, like, when you look at rotator cuff, I think it's rotator cuff specifically, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong here. When they really, so me, I think they just cleaned it up. They didn't, like, tighten anything down or anything like that. But he doesn't have any motion, and I still don't have as much as I should, just from my surgeries too. But he has literally no layback. Like, he can't get into the layback position well. And I think they were repairing him like not a baseball pitcher. And maybe you can speak to that on just like being good, flexible in that layback position is important as well.
Yeah. So those are, so we're talking about a person that had this injury versus what you should do for the healthy person.
Sure.
They can be quite different, right? If somebody has a decrease in what you're calling layback or external rotation, there are safe ways to work on that. But I rarely work external rotation in rehab and really for the healthy person, because you get so much of it by throwing. You're going to get there, right? I don't need to torque you anymore. And the reason why that injury happens, they have a zipper on the front here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they probably had what's called an open Bankart repair for that labrum. And what they do in there is they open it up. The reason why you had that labral tear is because that humerus is sliding. It's real sloppy in there on top of that glenoid. Sure. So what they're going to do is take those front muscles, they're going to overlap them, sew them down, cinch them nice and tight, so that way you're not sloppy anymore.
Right.
It's going to keep it here. There's other ways they used to do it too, probably when you were playing kind of like a cattle prod, where they actually just take something hot and kind of cinch up those. They don't do that anymore. That's bad news with that procedure now. But they used to do that all the time. Next thing we knew, we saw everybody was all sloppy again. But so for somebody like that, one of the challenges in rehab is to get them back to a normal range of motion, because you can't have high velo without good layback, right? Or good external rotation. So we have to do that safely. I do not recommend external rotation stretching for part of warm up. I just don't, because what you end up doing is you do partner stretches and some dude is cranking on somebody else's throwing arm. And we don't need that. Where I do think you need to improve though is internal rotation, right? And so there's a condition called GERD, Glenohumeral internal rotation deficit, right? And that's something that a lot of the major league teams are looking at as far as a risk factor to somebody, say, okay, they're at a certain percentage now, they're lacking, 10 degrees, 15 degrees, they're automatically going on the shelf until they can regain that internal rotation again. So something simple, I have my boys lay down oftentimes after practice. I teach them how to do this, say, hey, do it at night while you're watching the Tigers play. Do the sleeper stretch. That's exactly it, right? I mean, and that's great. Another one I like is they tuck it behind their arm, back into their pocket, and just pull their elbow forward. Mm-hmm. You'll feel it just crank right there. It's a great stretch, right? It's right there in that spot where you feel that deadness a lot of times, right?
That goes right to my labrum, man. I still feel where all that stuff's wired together.
Yeah, right. So, so from a stretching standpoint, I'm one of my big rules is warm up to throw, never throw to warm up. Never. So, in what you see pretty much unequivocally in any baseball field, the guys come in, they change into the dugout, they grab their mitt, they run to right field or left field line, they start throwing. You've got to get a sweat going before you start to throw. And so I just do a quick 5-minute little warm up that gets them sweated, gets them winded a little bit, and then they can throw, especially when you're talking in cold climates. And that's just little short sprints, side shuffles, right? A couple of different, techniques for sprinting and stuff like that. And then they're good to go, right? And the problem is a lot of these boys are like, nobody else is doing it, so I kind of look weird, right? Or I'm kind of the dork, or I'm not cool. Well, what's not cool is getting surgery and being on the shelf watching from the dugout for the rest of the season. So, get warm up to throw. If there's one thing you take away from this podcast today, warm up to throw. Don't throw to warm up.
Absolutely. And I'm I do 500 baseball lessons a day, so I'm just as bad as you're talking about. I'll go from a hitting lesson to a catching lesson or whatever, and I just hop in there and I'll just start throwing, and I still feel it. I'm out of the game and I'm at the coaching level now, but I feel it right away. I mean, and I don't know if you play this game long enough, your arm's going to hurt at some point. So I think there's a good understanding of like, am I injured? Is my arm hurt? Is my arm sore? I think there's huge differences between all three of those things, and really understanding and staying in tune with your body, your arm. And there's injured is just it's a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different ballgame. You know, if somebody slugs you on the arm and then you throw a baseball, like that's playing a little hurt, you know, and that stuff's okay. Like a bone bruise, if you get hit with a baseball and then you're throwing, like that stuff's okay. But if there's something down deep in there, if there's a sharp pain when you throw a baseball, you need to understand that is the last baseball you're going to throw until you understand what's going on and you get on a good plan to get that thing back on track. And it's so hard being, you know, for all you younger guys out there listening, or even parents, you know, you need to understand to take care of that arm. And that means being proactive when it starts to feel a little bit sore. I had a parent, and never in a million years would I call them out, but it was a parent that brought their kid in. And he's just like, oh yeah, you know, his arm's really sore. You know, his arm's really sore. It's hurting. I'm like, oh, it's fine. We just won't pitch today. We'll go through some, you know, just movements and stuff with the lower half and all that stuff. He's like, no, I want him to throw. And this kid was 12 years old. And he came in, and the kid could not throw a baseball. Like we're playing in our facility, which is, you know, we don't have much space. And he was throwing, and he couldn't make it to his partner. And I'm like, he's like, oh yeah, you know, he was pitching yesterday, and he just wasn't even making it to the plate and stuff. And it's just like that stuff is going on all over the place. It's going on in our backyard. It was brought into my facility, and now I have to sit this parent down and be like, look, man, you know, have a hard conversation with this guy. But it's like at 12 years old, you can't throw a baseball 40 feet. When you're good, when you know how to play baseball. I mean, the kid's played baseball for 6-7 years now. I mean, the kid knows how to play baseball. And it just made me cringe, man. And Brian and I had a conversation. I think it was 2 days ago. We were down and playing some baseball at a tournament, and this kid's, you know, everything's flying out and open, and he's throwing baseballs like that. And he had pitched, you know, 5 innings like the day before. We had saw them later in the tournament just because how seeding worked out. So we saw the same team, and the kid was back out there, and he had to have thrown 90 pitches the day before. And he goes out and throws 2 to 3 innings the next day. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So, and there's another thing to be said about, I mean, we talk about how to stretch your arm out. We talk about preventative maintenance on your arm. We talk about throwing, and being prepared to throw before you even throw. But it's another thing to just have your body support your arm while you're throwing, right? And pulling the head, pulling the shoulder, pulling all that stuff out is a nightmare for your arm. You have no support system. And also arm angle. I know, and Brian, this is where you can kind of chime in. I've heard elbow below the shoulder, we kind of start to lose that support there. And then the further away we get from our body is the less support that we have as well. So I think if you think about 1 o'clock, I got to move my notes here so I can see if my arm's in the screen, but I think like 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, right, is kind of how that window that we want to be. And you see that, you know, when you're flipping a ball to somebody and it's nice and easy, it's normally like at that 1 o'clock, right? And when we drop down to 2, I think you start to lose velo and you start to feel it here a little bit. But I think velo, like you look at the hardest throwing guys in the big leagues, right? And they're about 130, 145 at max. You know, those guys that are 95 plus. So I don't know if that just allows you that extra range of motion in that position, or if that's actually the best place for you to throw a baseball. But a lot of times when we get guys down here, we put a ball in their arm right here, and then we just have them throw balls into the net or whatever, just so they can feel like a ball they have to hold in here, and then they're just nice and easy right in here, so they can feel that range of motion a little tighter to the body.
Yeah, you know, it's the full package, and that's the interesting part, right? Is you can coach one part of the segment, but yet if they're opening up wide and they're spinning off, it doesn't matter what you do up here. You know what I mean? So it's all together. I think it's important for them to be able to get on top of the ball, but you need to see how they're getting on top of the ball, right? So if they're way low, right, in here, the way that they get there is to do this, to get on top of the ball. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. So I like them to be as parallel with the ground that they can be and have a good arm angle. But so often the arm angle looks good, but the reason why it's not is because
they're right here. Yeah.
right? And so they look like they're there, but then when you bring it down, they're here you go,
Right.
right? Where they end up being.
You're
So
like, oh, this guy throws over top, he's right over top, but in all actuality, he's like 90 degrees to the ground,
he's throwing sideways, right?
Yeah.
He's really a sidearm, right? So
Yeah.
so you definitely need to take a look at that. I do worry when the elbow drops. That's a sign to me they got rotator cuff tendonitis or some kind of weakening going on. They can't get there, right? And so they start to drop it. Just doing a little bit of rehab with my son yesterday. He drops in some long toss. He says, "Oh," and he gets it there. And he says, "Oh, that feels better." We're not doing that. That's fine. Let's talk about why that's not okay, right? A lot of times you can throw those legs out of it and overcompensate, and you start to slinging, right? And we want it to be more of a drive versus a sling.
Right.
You can talk about that kind of stuff if you're looking at revolutions and things, but make sure you got a trained eye looking at everything else. So one thing, I think that one of the single most important stats also to think about is this kid that you mentioned, right, from this tournament, he no doubt was tired, right? He had to be tired. Data coming out of Jimmy Andrews' lab tells us that when a kid says they were tired when they were throwing, they increase their chance of injury by like 4,000%. I mean, that's just unbelievable, right? So volume is a big deal. And you mentioned too, time off. If you throw more than 8 months in the year, you increase your injury rate by 500%. And so you're looking at these stats, and that's where, so I share these statistics that are all published, right, from these folks that live and die in baseball labs, and this is language we talk, to share with parents, because not every kid is going to play in the league, but they do want to play at least through high school or through travel ball. Well, let's make that as healthy as we can be. So even those kids that are throwing heat doesn't mean that they should continue to throw that way just because they're throwing hard. Throwing hard is not a good estimate or not a good indication that they're throwing healthy. Hard doesn't equal healthy, right? So hopefully some of these tidbits here that we're sharing will help folks with navigating their travel ball league with their recreation league, because a lot of times travel ball is just tournaments, but and so they want some other, they want to be the pitcher because they can't pitch necessarily in the travel ball league. Well, next thing you know, their volumes are crazy and nobody's talking to the other person. And it was one of the worst situations, right, is if you pitch for both, right? So I always, hey, listen, this is games. I'm going to be just fine winning or losing. I like to win, right? But I will never do it on the back of a young kid that can throw hard and get outs, right? And so I've lost games because I'm like, hey, you're at 75. That's it. I feel good, coach. No, you're done, bud. That's all. Hey, thanks for everything you got. Next guy's in. Trust your teammate, right? And then we go that way. So I think more coaches need to be doing that. And not worried about, how pretty their website looks with all the trophies they've got, and really dictate their success by allowing a healthy experience for their kids.
Absolutely. And I'm the same way, man. I mean, I've said since day one, as part of our program, travel ball specifically, is we're preparing you to play baseball at the next level, whatever that looks like for you, right? If you're 12, we're preparing you to play, middle school, high school baseball, and high school to college. And then we have college guys who work out and that have a real shot to go to the next level. And it's just like, people are trying to put these travel ball programs together just to get those dubs, and it's like, dude, who cares if you won some podunk tournament, in the Midwest? Like, sweet,
Right.
But if you can take a kid and prepare him for the next level, you're in a pretty good spot. So, I guess I want to end today, Brian. If I want to talk a little bit about what you see the future of biomechanics in baseball and softball looking like. I mean, you're right there in it, seeing the new developments and stuff like that. Where do you see it going from here on out? And then follow that up, if you would, if you had 30 seconds to get one message across to coaches and players, what would that look like?
Yeah. Well, analytics is where it's at. It's amazing to me each year that I've gone out and spent some time with some different teams around spring training. They're building biomechanical labs in their facilities, right? I had a team actually that took me on a tour. They built this best biomechanic lab I've ever seen, right? I had to sign a non-disclosure statement to let me go ahead and take a tour. So I can't tell you the team, well, let's just say it's the best integrated force plates into the mound, force plates in the hitting areas, high-speed cameras. We're talking 20, 40, $50,000 of just one camera, right? We're talking significant. Not to mention when they're throwing bullpens now, right? They're looking at spin velocity and direction and arm angle, and they're looking at all this. And guys, after they throw, are asking for their stats to know where they were, right? And we're talking guys that have made the All-Star team in the big leagues, right? That have World Series championships. They're asking, hey, where am I at right now? What's my spin rate? What's this and that, right? How's it looking? Because they know that it starts with mechanics and volume management. That's where it comes down to. So when we're looking at these analytics, those folks are behind the scenes. So one team in particular I spent a lot of time with, they have an entire staff of, they call them the nerds, right? They've got video on everything. They've got the data on everything. They're creating the spreadsheets, running the analysis, and sharing it with the guys. So when they get back in their locker, they've got a report right there to take a look at. And after they go out and they work out all day, the guys are coming in, spending time on the computer, going with the analysts, right? And these are just people that have stats degrees and love baseball. You know what I mean? And it's not, we're not talking the stats like RBI, hitting percentage, stuff like that. We're talking other analytical performance stats, right? So I think, to leave guys with girls with today is understand your body, know what you can do, don't push it, be smart. For coaches, it's not about you, so don't make it about you, right? It's about that kid. Look at them as a responsibility that you have to them to make sure that they stay healthy. And I'm not saying every arm injury is a coach's problem, right? Or that they were the source of it. But there's a lot of coercion that happens, right? And a lot of these kids are just going to say, sure, coach, I can do that, right? But they shouldn't be put in that position. So ask good questions, take care of yourself. Don't be afraid to say, I just can't do it today, and take a break, right? And just have fun, right? Have fun doing what you do, right? That's a key. That's what I'm going to leave you with. Have fun at all angles, win or lose, and it's about the experience.
Awesome, man.